Wonderful. So we are live now, and to this very first Clarity Live session. And welcome, Niall, to the session. It's good to have you here. And we will do a quick introduction in a second. So this is an experiment again on how we can bring a bit more value back to the community. So it might be a bit off and on here today in our first experiment, and we see, but we decided on just doing an improv call, right? So that's how we do it today. And so, Niall, tell us a bit about you and what you do.
Okay, thanks very much, Holger. So my name's Niall Daly. I live in the UK, just south of London. I'm an accountant by training, so probably as far away from visual as you can possibly get. I've spent the last 30 years in various guises. I've been a management consultant, an accountant, but more recently, the last probably 10 years, I work as a growth coach and mentor for small businesses. And again, a lot of that is traditionally around business plans, spreadsheets, slide decks. But personally, I'm a much more visual person. So it's been a bit under the covers, under the radar screen. So I was mind mapping for many years. I met Holger in 2016 and did some training with him to illuminate me in the art of what I call functional drawing, just getting things out there and make sense to you and not worry too much about whether they're sort of totally pretty or not. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Yeah, and just as a disclosure, like as you said already, we met a few years back. You came to Cologne, right? And we had some good days together spending on how to work more visual, and that was pretty cool. And that's when you reached out that you would like to be the guinea pig for the first session. I said, okay, yeah, let's do it, right? We have a warm start.
Yep.
And no pressure, right? Wonderful. So for those of you who might watch this video, don't know me as a person, I'm Holger Niels Pohl. I'm based here in Cologne, Germany. And I'm helping individuals, teams, and organizations to transform by laying the focus on clarity. So all I do is helping people to get clarity or to transport clarity and communicate with clarity. And in most cases, I do that with visual tools. And yeah, today we have kind of a coaching session together now, right? And we forget everybody who's watching as well live and have a conversation between the two of us. But of course, you as a chat, you're very much invited to ask questions. I already see some familiar faces. Cecilia is here, Hank, Gray, Victor Rees. So thank you for joining in today and everybody who will join later, right? So for the next, let me look at the watch here. For the next 57 minutes, we will just have a conversation on your biggest challenge and try to get some steps ahead on how you could solve that. And hopefully for everybody who's watching, there are a lot of insights on the side that you can implement yourself when you watch this video, right? So Niall, how is it? Like, what is your biggest challenge right now?
So the big challenge is I'm trying to reinvent what I do, and I want to make it more visual as a prime point rather than it being something that comes in during the process. So I got the idea of the visual entrepreneur, which is a business person who is more visually led. Great idea, but people don't know me as a visual person. I'll be known as an accountant or business growth person. So trying to make the transition so that people, A, see the value of being more visual in their working, not necessarily about drawing, but just being broadly visual rather than detail orientated, spreadsheet orientated, slide deck orientated. but also targeting people that will be relevant to, and ignoring people who that probably won't be relevant to, which is to me just a harder sell.
Absolutely, that's true. And perhaps to understand that a bit better, when you say you're famous or you're known for spreadsheets and slide decks as an accountant, so how do we have to imagine your work until now then?
So a lot of it will be, talking with clients, trying to build a business plan, the very traditional business plan, long form. You might be lucky to see the odd graph, but a lot of tables and numbers, and not really a lot of what I call big picture visualization. So what tends to happen is you'll get in and you'll start talking and you'll be developing something, and then the business person or the team gets stuck and they can't work their way through something. And inevitably then out comes the whiteboard. In the old days when you could do whiteboards, or the online whiteboard, and the picture gets drawn. And then, as you use the word clarity, the light bulbs come on and people get moving again.
Right.
Rather than, I think, what I want to do is to start there to help people get unblocked sooner. But if people talk to me, they go, yeah, but I need a spreadsheet. Maybe you don't. Maybe we should talk about that.
Right. So, okay, what I hear is one of the challenges, and let me just change the view and see if that works as well. If I put to speaker view, and perhaps it shows myself hopefully in a second here in the live stream too, so that everybody can see me. And I pin myself for a second, or can I pin myself? So let's see if that works. So if everybody sees my drawing here. But so what you do basically is you provide those kind of spreadsheets and the calculator and that kind of stuff, and somehow people get stuck by trying to understand their business model in a kind of a long form Excel spreadsheet way, because it's kind of, they're getting stuck, and the question is how to get unstuck. But the challenge is that you don't want to even start with that. Did I understand you right? So what you would like to do is basically that will be kind of a step that goes basically away, right? Because you don't want that to happen. So you want to start, let me get that away. You would like to start the process with however that looks like, right? So visuals that kind of show more or less the bigger picture, that help people with, for example, we have the business model canvas as a tool. If I understand you right, that could be one of the tools that is in your line of work too, and perhaps even thinking about, I don't know, value proposition canvas, right? Who's our customer? What's the value we create? And helping them go along that journey without the block that we just had. I mean, that block that I just killed. And what is your fear when you approach people right with that process and not with the spreadsheet and the calculator?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's the point that some, not everybody, but a lot of people view the visuals as not being serious. They might be useful as a sort of side conversation, but serious business is in the sort of the documents, the analysis, and the spreadsheets. Then they have a place, but maybe not at the front of the process. Maybe they should be a result of getting clearer thinking and more resolving issues and dilemmas, which visuals like you portray there, they bring things to the surface. But sometimes people don't take that seriously in the early stages.
True. And while you're saying that, I'm just drawing like a rough iceberg, and what you try to do is basically bring the stuff to the surface, right? With the tools that you have, for example, here on the picture. But so what I think, here's one thing, Niall, that I think when it comes to your approach is the misperception of the tools are the value that you create, right? Because when I see you and I know you, Niall, and we talk to each other here, I think the visual tools are not the value that you create, right? The value that you create is what you do with the tools and with the people. So the question is, how important is it really to tell people upfront that you're using all those tools and that this is kind of the main thing that you do, versus saying, I don't have like a good picture for that, I guess, but or let's try this is, and I see that with a lot of, like, I'm telling you that because I see that with a lot of companies as well, and we fall into that kind of, into that idea of, if we have kind of a toolbox, right? If we have a toolbox, let me just draw quickly a toolbox here. And in the toolbox, we have all our visual tools and the processes that we have, and whatever it is, what we bring to the table, everything is in there. It somehow feels like we are powerful because we now can solve everything. But this toolbox is basically offering, is what they offer us are nothing else than tools and processes, right? That's what they offer. But what we really want to do is we want to create outcomes, right? So what we really want to do is we want to fix this kind of water, how do you call it in English?
Cap?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's leaking right now, right? So
Yeah, leaky pipe.
Yeah, it's broken, right? So your outcome would be that you fix something, and no matter which kind of tool you use, hopefully you use the best tool, you achieve your outcome.
Yeah.
So what I hear at the moment, Niall, is a question. As much as you're enthusiastic about visual tools, I know how enthusiastic you are, how important is that really for the customer?
I think that's absolutely nailed it on the head. I think there is, and I declare my bias, and that's probably part of the problem, is that you're right. It's what does somebody want, and what is the right way to get it. And I still believe, but I don't need to declare it, that as you've done, sketching something out gets towards the answer. And I think the other thing is it can then be thrown away because it's served its purpose. And the purpose might be to unblock somebody, get some clarity over something, align a team around an objective. So the outcome is what's important, not necessarily the approach. And maybe you've got to be flexible with the approach. So I think probably I've blocked myself a little bit with by wanting to move so far away so quickly from traditional tools that might actually be tripping me up a little bit.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of as well, like, and I feel that you know that too. I mean, that's it, by the way, it's a super cool thing I didn't think myself about, that this here is like the thing that I threw away. And I could do the same with the other sketches I did. So once you use some, like a tool, a visual tool or a drawing, it basically is not needed anymore. I mean, often enough we take a picture of this and to use that further, but basically you don't need that anymore. It's kind of, it served its purpose, so you can get rid of it. So why talking about it too much in the beginning, right? But still, what I find interesting as well is when you approach this this thing now, like the thought of your own process is, do you really need to get rid of the old tools, right? Because I feel that,
yeah,
right, I completely feel that, for example, what we always or often say is, look, you need somehow a vision. That's when I draw this kind of drawing of where do we want to get and where we are today. That's kind of your big vision for the beginning, right? You start always with that somehow. And you might work on your business model, which where you would use the business model canvas, in most cases, to identify how can you create value for your company. And you would use as well the value proposition canvas where you speak about how do I create value for my customers, right? And for whom. But once you have done that, that is pretty high level.
Yeah.
So on a second layer underneath, a lot of people forget, and I think that is your specific strength. A lot of people forget that you need spreadsheets.
Absolutely,
right?
Completely agree. Yeah.
So all these nasty small things and the numbers, and you need as well slides, because you might need to present what you have done to investors, customers, whoever it is. So it is basically something that enriches each other rather than one or the other. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's the framing is what's important, because as you say, it's putting the picture around it and having those various elements into play as and when they need to. And I think going back to the toolkit, it's probably then knowing when to pull another tool out of the bag rather than pushing forward with one that's now served its purpose. So, for example, if you've done a business model canvas and the client's very clear on what the revenue model is, you don't have to keep doing something. You can then get into going, okay, well, let's put this into spreadsheet and see how that works. But if you're not then clear about your cost model, maybe we need to drill into that into a little bit more detail. Let's sketch out the operations and overlay the financial costs on that in more detail.
True. Absolutely. It's kind of a jumping back and forth, right? It's kind of
it's an iterative
right
approach.
And you dive sometimes more in the detail. Sometimes you get out of it and you pull the right tool. What this is triggering for me is the question as well. Do you is the blocker in the tools that you propose, right? Where you say like, I want to use more visual tools and that kind of stuff, or is the blocker of your customers as well in the understanding of the process that they run through when you work with them? So like what a lot of like clients struggle with is kind of saying, okay, here's my customer's process and where do I fit in and where do I create value, right? Let's try doing that together quickly. So you said it's about like, sorry for that, excuse me. It's when we look at the process, so to say, the journey of your customers, in which kind of state do you help them?
They're mostly in a state of they want to grow, but they haven't quite got the plan in place and the structures in place to make that growth happen. So they're doing well. They're not business in distress, but they're not growing as fast or as because they would like to. Whatever growth means, it means different things to different people, but it's that change.
Right. So they're in the process. Yeah, right. They are kind of in a steady process, not really a startup. Your perfect customer, or like somebody who's running already, right?
Yeah.
And the wish is that they can scale up at least a bit, whatever that means, right? Worldwide, or just 2 people more, or more clients, or whatever it is. So when you say that, if this is the goal, I think there is of course a process for them to go through that you might help them with, right? So it's kind of, I mean, it's assessing the existing business model, right? Which is, I just draw a business model canvas again because I like it so much, and it's easy to draw, by the way. But so they start assessing what they have, right? So the business model, the numbers, right? All that kind of stuff, where they are.
Yeah.
They might as well create like if that is kind of the trying to understand where they are. That's kind of the baseline. What they need to create as well to do that is, again, somehow a growth model, right? How can they grow out of the existing into something else, which might be as well consisting in or having as a part of it that kind of journey of like where we are right now and where do we want to get, what's our kind of vision that we really want to achieve. As well, they need to create somehow an action plan, do they? Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
So they need an action plan to kind of, take the next step. And for some, there might be even that phase of sharing. Does it? Like, for example, presenting a slide deck to possible investors or partners.
And even to their own team within their organization. So there's always going to be that explanation phase for what the change is going to look like and what they want to be like in the future.
Right. Yeah, true. So, I mean, that's interesting because when you look at it this way, the question is, wouldn't it be possible that we create something for you to say, okay, this is the process that my clients run through, right? They kind of, if they want to kind of change and transform the business that they are in, they want to understand the current business model, they design a new one, understand what kind of actions they need to take, and they have to share it with their team, customers, investors, and so forth. So I think that could serve as a nice story for clients to understand where you help them. If you do that in a visual way, I mean, that's not the perfect way here I did because I used too many tools, right? You don't want to show the tools, but you want to explain what they do. But so there are like multiple levels of kind of introducing the visual tools in your practice to say, okay, if you sit down with them or you present what you do to them, you could show a visual that already shows like, this is how I see the process that you as a client, as my client, has to run through, right? If your vision is to grow, you will need to understand it, you need to create something new, you share it, right? And along the way, I can help you with the knowledge that I have as an accountant, because I know where to look for all the pitfalls that can happen, for all the chances that you have in growing your business. And while you're doing that with the visual tool, you already kind of through the back door, right? You get them into that thinking of, oh yeah, right, that is pretty easy to understand for me. And then you can even say, where should we start, right? Are you already finished with this? And do you have the material? Should we already start here? Or do you only need help in the sharing? So I see that could be something of value for getting your clients a first idea of, okay, Niall is doing something else than a normal accountant, it seems.
I think that's right. I think what's interesting is where you've got the business and you've got the dotted line and then the hard line. To me, what that's focused on for me is people want to bridge that gap. They want to bridge the gap between where they would go and where they want to go, which to me also brings a nice visual to mind, which is, that you're trying to help them bridge a gap and put in place, particularly where you've got the action plans. Very often people are sometimes very good at having visions, not very good at plotting the steps to get there.
Yeah, right. So between here and there, right, it's kind of often a huge gap for people, right?
And again, I think that's a challenge for people. So again, it's what is the best way to help them see what they need to put in place to build that bridge. I mean, that will be a mix of things, but the point being, it's going to be very focused activity that's going to help them do something different. Because if they continue to do what they always do and don't do anything different, the dotted line will continue or go down. They need to do something different to go on that other journey. And that again is so what does the end look like? But more importantly as well, what does the journey look like?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like that. And I mean, we have a good comment from Didier in the YouTube chat, by the way, which I would like to put in here. It's a question which is on the same hand a comment. Could the visual tools enhance the traditional tools, spreadsheets and PowerPoint, in such a way that your work had a supplementary value for them? Right.
I think that's a really, really good point, and probably yes. And again, I think that's probably where I've been a bit too right. Need to stop doing that and do. So I think actually the supplementary bit is actually probably much more important than I probably thought before.
I feel personally,
that's a really good idea. Thank you, video.
Value. Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's kind of the one biggest value. It's the supplementary.
But it's sometimes just staring the obvious. You don't see it yourself. It needs somebody else to tell you it's obvious.
I mean, that's why we do this session, Niall.
Exactly.
And that's good that we achieved something. So what one thing that I'm not sure if you're familiar with that tool, but one tool comes into mind. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Do you know the Strategy Innovation Canvas by Christian Rangen?
No, I don't. No.
Okay, let me show that to you as well, because that could enrich your toolbox too, Niall, especially in that phase, in the transition of where do we want to get, what's our vision, and taking it somehow into an action plan.
Yeah.
So let me try to explain that quickly on a high level, because I think that could help you in your toolbox. So Chris is a friend of mine, a consultant in Norway who's making strategy tools IO. And he has over 100 visual tools by now, I think. So he's quite passionate about visual tools. and I always joke with him and say, like, look, your first tools are still the ones that I'm using all the time. And one of the first is he called it the Strategy Innovation Canvas. So let me see. Strategy Innovation Canvas. And the nice thing is that this goes quite nicely along with the business model canvas. So the basic idea is that you have one axis, which is about the craziness of your model, your business model, or the things that you do. The higher, the crazier. And here down here, it's pretty boring, right? It's kind of zero sum. It's kind of what you do anyway. And then you have the time axis on the bottom, where I often say, okay, this is today. And at least you say, I mean, 1 year is pretty short. I would say 5 to 10 years. Often enough, I take 10 years here. And then you have the 3 dimensions on this canvas. So the first dimension, that is your current operational business, where you say, okay, this is what I do anyway, and I could improve that a bit. That's kind of your dotted line on the sketch that we did before. And then you have a second dimension, which are logical improvements, which are basically very close to what you do anyway, and they kind of come out of what you do already, and you kind of can forecast what you could do.
Yeah.
And then you could have radical improvements here in the rest of the canvas, where you say, when you look at them right now, they are pretty far out, right? Mm-hmm. You would not really consider doing them right now. So how this turns out in a very rough way, so it's a very rough storytelling here, because it's, as I said, it's improv, right? But so let's take Amazon. When they started off with Jeff Bezos, who's, I think, is he retired now? I'm not sure, but he's close to, right? He's going out of Amazon at the moment. But when they started, he said Amazon should be the world's largest marketplace, right? He didn't say we want to be the biggest bookseller, so he wanted to be the world's largest marketplace. That was the vision. You put that vision on top here, because it's the 10-year ambition. It's pretty crazy, because right now you can't do it. But he started with the book sell, right? So he sold books, and he slowly built up his business by adding logical improvements. For example, he tried CD sales and cassettes and that kind of stuff, right? And then the next step from that, in terms of the strategic development here, we have, okay, they opened up the marketplace for their competitors to sell on their own platform, right? That would have been even radical from the get-go, but when they already built those kind of small things onto it, it was not too far away. It was kind of a logical thing to say, why not having our competitors on the market? And then, you know, the story, they continued, they had the Kindle, right? They have the KDP, they have Kindle Unlimited, so authors under subscription models, right? They now have Fresh and all the other stuff that they have. So they build up over time. So, but if you, for example, now it's looking back, it's easy. But if you say you have that vision and you start with the books, what else can you do to kind of go over? The interesting thing is that Amazon said, like, look, even today we're selling the books because they're still a valuable piece of our business model. Pretty boring, right? But still, it's fine.
Yeah.
And what you can ask your clients too, when you do that with them, is to say, okay, where do you want to get? Where are you right now? What are the steps in that direction? But as well, are there some things that you could do right away, which are pretty crazy? So when I met Chris for the first time, he did this with me. And he said, for example, why don't you reach out to the CEO of Google X right now to see if he can value of your visual tools? That was kind of 7-8 years ago or so. I didn't do it. I was too anxious to do that, right? But it would be something that I could have done right away.
Yeah. I see.
And it could have changed the whole trajectory of my business. And when you now see that and transfer that into Niall Daly's business, right? You could see behind all those things here a business model canvas, right? A separate one for your clients. So what you do is then you kind of say, okay, behind every single spot on this one, you basically have a business model canvas. So you can fill out the business model canvas, add the numbers, blah, 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 blah. And then you have a roadmap of evolutionary, step-by-step growing business models that add up to the vision that you have in the future. I felt that this is a pretty powerful tool.
It is, and I think actually the intervention that we've just gone through has sort of reinforced to me that actually the conversation of having what I call it, putting a picture in the middle of a conversation, where you're using a frame of reference that allows you to share that information is much more powerful than just having a face-to-face conversation with nothing,
right?
Or just sharing something in a meeting and then trying to document it afterwards, because you can overlay so much more understanding with some really good questions. And maybe, as Didier said, you can actually then overlay numbers. You could use different color post-it notes to sort of say, right, well, let's look at the business model here. Let's then overlay some numbers, customer numbers, revenue, costs, market share.
Yeah, you could put that to here, right? And say like, okay, here, customers, revenue, market share, revenues, whatever it is, right? And
they can go into a spreadsheet later, but at least you've almost got some of the background assumptions captured using a very simple framework.
Yeah. And it's, for a lot of people, that's why I show this to you, Niall, especially and hopefully for everybody who's watching this is helpful too. But what I feel this is good for is, especially for people who are not that close to visual tools, because we could have done this here the same way, so to say, with the world map, for example, right? We could have said, okay, we have like a huge map here, like this, and we have some continents on it, random shapes here, whatever it is, perhaps even like this, our vision, and some islands here, right? And you could have said, okay, we are here right now, and we want, like, this is our vision, and this is basically how we travel there, and we map all the different things that we had on the strategy innovation canvas onto this, right? That works as well. The problem is, or the challenge is, that this is already a fast stretch in terms of thinking for people who are coming from the Excel spreadsheet world.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas this one here is more like a graphical representation, which people get very easily.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's about which kind of tool do I pull as well. So do you have the feeling somebody's open and more into that thinking already? Perhaps you pull like a world map because it's more immersive, right? But then this one helps people more like on the logical point of view, right?
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think also there's a value in it not being put down as saying we're going to do a tool. What we're doing, it comes back to the very first point, which is sort of just smacking my head. Is it's obvious. So the conversation is we're going to get. I know you using your term, the clarity.
Yeah.
We need clarity of direction.
Yeah.
Or we need clarity of what your options are.
Yeah.
Or let's understand some of your options and just put a picture in the middle and use that as a focal point for a conversation.
Exactly. And I mean, what I sometimes like, Niall, and this might be something for everybody as well. And let me just read the chat for a second, because we have a lot of comments here before I take to the last point. So Didier was asking as well how to look at what is in the net, and the net and the fishes are spreadsheets and PowerPoint, right? We need to kind of unclutter that, right? And we can talk about that in a second. And I mean, Didier says as well, the book selling point online was even radical. So that's true, Didier. But what was radical about Amazon as well is that they had this vision. There was a book selling platform that I forgot, and they only had the vision to become the biggest book seller online for, I don't know, Sweden or Norway or so. They started at the same time like Amazon. And of course, they lost market share very quickly because they didn't have that vision of going globally with the whole market, right? And so, Niall, what I like sometimes to do is that I start my conversations. I mean, a lot of people come to me and they kind of know what I'm doing and who I am and how I act and what others know me for. But still, I like to start a lot of meetings when I meet someone fresh. I like to start them like this, right? I can watch them in the eyes and talk to them and hear what they feel. And sometimes I enjoy, and that's a bit evilish, I guess, if I share that right now, but I like to let people get stuck in a conversation. And then I pull a visual tool. Right?
I think that's the interesting thing. But rather than what in my head, it's like I'm going to prejudge you're stuck, and therefore I'm going to introduce a tool immediately, which either could get your barriers up or could confuse you totally. So I think, manipulative it may be, but I think you're right.
Yeah, and it sounds a bit unfair if I say it that way, right? But I somehow enjoy that too, because it's a bit of a challenge, right? Because you never know if they really get stuck, can you get them out of that being stuck? But for me, it has always shown if I pull a visual tool, and if it's just a drawing that I do to clarify my thoughts, what I understood, what they are talking about, and we start from there, right? And Niall, I know we spoke about the sketching piece as well. Let's dive into that one in a second too. But I mean, like this dynamic of people having a conversation, they try to explain to me the challenge that they have and all that kind of stuff, and it's back and forth. And at the point where it feels like they are going into that rabbit hole and repeating themselves, and so you pull that visual tool and say, look, I have the sense that we're speaking about this and that. Perhaps we could try this approach. And then I explain them what I want to do with them with the visual tool. For example, the strategy innovation canvas that I showed to you very quickly. Everybody gets it somehow, and then we can continue. And after the session, they always say that was the breakthrough point. and then I have them.
Yeah.
We
And I
spoke
think,
about the fishes, right? Didier, the fishes in the pond, right? Then I have them on the hook.
I think you're right. And I also think that there is a beautiful simplicity, which I hadn't really sort of played in my mind of what you did. I'm going to have to play that back of the very simple drawings that led the conversation. And then there was a template. But I think the beauty of the template is not to put something in a box, but to be flexible enough to allow a conversation to flow. And then you can change the template if it's not working.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things I sometimes worry about is if you put too much of a framework around some of these, like there's so many canvases in the world at the moment. Some of them are, you put people in a box rather than allowing a little bit more freedom of conversation. But you got the confidence. I think that's one of the things I'm learning is actually just use the ears more to listen to what people are saying and use that as that to drive a conversation rather than trying to prejudge it.
It's a valuable point in there, Niall, in terms of the listening and prejudgment. So, I mean, one argument for doing the session live was for me, I don't have to prepare it and I don't have to edit it afterwards. It's what it is, right? Which allows me a lot of freedom, right? And not so much work before and afterwards. But as well, I mean, I asked you one time for the challenge upfront, right? Where like, what is your challenge that you want to broadly speak about? And you gave me one sentence of your challenge. That was everything I knew before. And then in our check-in call today, before we started the live session, I asked again, are we talking about the same session, the same challenge? So I'm not completely taken off guard, right? But beyond that, I didn't even think about any solution for you before, because that allowed me to listen to you better than if I have that framework in mind. I need to push in that, I need to push in that direction. And I think that could be valuable too. So some people are commenting on the evil part now. They say I had to laugh evilish about the point as well. So like like this. Okay, now I did it. So one thing that could be helpful, I mean, for you, Niall, again, and for our audience too, who are listening, the live stream, just in terms of how I started. So let me see. I throw it away.
Why did I? They're all in the bin.
I threw it in the bin. Damn it. I wanted to show it again. So now I need it again. So let me that might be a bit loud. Sorry. So if we look at this picture.
This proves it was live.
It's proven it's live, yeah. So if we look at this picture here, I started with that. That was me trying to understand what you're saying. Yep. And I tried to put it very simple. So you said you're working with the spreadsheet and the calculator, right? And people getting stuck when they talk about all their business model stuff and so forth. And I used that to just ask you, did I understand you right? So that for me was the stage of clarification, right? And so that was my intro into how can I get a grip on the problem. So, and then I deliberately used very simple drawings while we spoke to each other. So I think I started with this one here. That was my first input to you, and saying, okay, here, like you might want to use a tool like the world map or to develop the vision, business model, kind of blah, blah, blah. You talked about something about bringing it to the surface, but I used very simple drawings, and literally everybody can draw these, right? I mean, you can't tell me you can't draw these, Niall.
I actually agree with you. I think they're functional, but they serve a purpose that is to, I look at them and I know what a business model canvas is, and I know that and I know what an iceberg is. And I now you put that back up, I actually remember that part of the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And
They're great anchors and prompts.
And yeah, and what I feel is they don't raise the barrier for the conversation too much. So I don't have a great example for you right now. So let me find one. I mean, it's from, by the way, it's a great book. I just bought. Do you know the
Oh yes, great.
tool for
I've been reading that. It's a really, really useful book.
Oh yeah, it's great. So for everybody who's watching, highly recommended this book from two friends of mine, Stefano Mastrogiacomo and Alex Osterwalder. And it's a great book again, and it's a great visual book. So, and I'm just saying, if I would have drawn something like this for our conversation, that would have put us off track.
Yes.
Right? Because there's so much barrier to entrance to talk about this. It's too much on it. It's refined. For a book, it's the perfect illustration because it's nice, it's fresh, right? It gives an idea of, right, what is in the book, especially if you wrote the pages before. It's a perfect illustration for a book. But for a conversation, I always say keep it as easy as possible, as simple, by purpose. Even if you could draw like Leonardo da Vinci right now, right? Keep it as simple as possible. Don't add too much fuss to it. Even though I've drawn some more details on this one here, but to be honest, pretty simple still.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think is also one of the key parts is just to make things functional, because again, as you say, you don't want to create a barrier with the client or the customer, which inverted commas art could do. Somebody's got to take action on what they've heard, not go away thinking that was a nice picture. Yeah, true. I feel you definitely, and I think that's really important to have this awareness for, yes, it's super cool to have pictures and stuff, but don't overdo it as well. I know that some people or a lot of people don't think that way, and we kind of jump often into one or the other pendulum kind of side of the pendulum, right? But I feel like let's keep it as simple as possible to enrich a conversation. And that's another thing that I like to do. What you could consider, Niall, too, is often enough, I don't even use the templates anymore, but I quickly draw them. So when I would use, for example, the strategy innovation canvas, I would draw the strategy innovation canvas and put sticky notes on it. I would draw the business model canvas and put sticky note on it. Because if we see it's not serving our purpose well, it's easier to get rid of that than the final kind of printout of a template. And in a digital environment, of course, you can easily kind of plug and play with templates too. But even there, sometimes I use, when I'm using Miro, for example, I'm using Miro for the digital whiteboard solution. I'm using my iPad to enter the board, and then I draw the tools, sometimes by purpose, to be less strict with it and enable people to think beyond the process and say like, yeah, that's interesting, but let's do another one. And so, let's do another one. Let's do a 2x2 matrix. Okay. And now a world map, and now a speedboat template, and whatever it is, we can jump between the different tools easily because it doesn't feel like we're stuck in a box. I think that's and I think that's again another learning, is that it's very easy to get caught up in the sort of the box of something, and that takes you away from the purpose of trying to help somebody get unstuck, because it's almost like, well, let me show you this really clever way of talking about a customer journey map, when really all you need is 3 swim lanes and a load of post-it notes, rather than a multicolored 3-dimensional, emotion curve line.
Absolutely. Yeah, so basically the sticky notes are still the ones that I use most often, I guess. When I'm drawing a lot, that's true. I mean, even our conversation, I killed like half of a tree, but I still can't get rid of paper, to be honest. That's another thing. I'm using the iPad extensively, but I still prefer paper for quick sketches or something, right?
it's still good for speed, very quick.
Yeah, and especially in a virtual setting, I like to do that as well with the paper. It gives that feeling of like being close to each other more than everybody's focusing on a digital whiteboard somehow.
Yeah.
If I can, right?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a big difference because again, it broadens that whole sense of the word visual is more that engaging with an artifact. That, well, visual just means you're seeing something, whether it's a post-it note or a piece of paper or a Miro board. It doesn't really matter. It's a means to an end.
Absolutely. Cool. So let me read some of the comments here. So Scott as well wrote, like, just get something on paper. As we said, paper. Evolution needs something to start with, right? Draw again and again. And that's why we need it to make it simple and fast. And Gray Miller says as well, it's not just that they are pictures, they are leveraging the power of story to motivate and create change.
I like that.
That's an important piece of it, right? Because you can link your own story easily to those pictures as well. And I guess, I mean, you as like who's watching this live need to kind of tell me, but I guess for at least some of you, even though we spoke about Niall's stuff, when I have drawn this out, you might have found connections to your own work, right? And how you could do it. So that's as well what's happening. It's easier to relate to it, I think, than just on voice. And then we have as well, Scott, again, I always feel something click when you toss your first drawing and start a new one and then another new one, right? I forgot and when to make the first one the best one, right? So I think it's about this iterative approach too, right? Just getting that down.
I think that's right. And also as humans, we don't fall in love with your first idea because it's never going to be right. You've got to be prepared to cycle around things. And that's maybe where, as you did earlier, you screw the paper up and threw it away. And you can use that metaphorically with digital, but that's the beauty of it. You don't get the whole, and maybe that's part of the issue is once something's in a spreadsheet, people tend to view it as being a bit final. So as Didier said, blending the two you can do, but use the upfront thinking process to iterate before you get into the point where, okay, now we can put this somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to really understand there is a time for everything, right? It's not the one or the other. It's always like in the process, you jump back and forth. I think that's important. The drawing that we did here on this one here, right? It's always this jumping back and forth between visual, then spreadsheet, numbers, right? Make it explicit, like all that kind of back and forth, I think is very important. To not lose that out of focus, but like having the time in view here and mindful of time, want to ask you now, like with the stuff that we spoke about today, what would be your next action points?
Very good question. So I've taken 3 big learnings, which is it's all about the outcomes. Don't worry about the process. Everything should be a blended approach because the outcomes are almost certainly going to require different components to make those real. And then I think I took the fact there is a way of visualizing the process that people need to go through, which was the drawing that you did with the 2 arrows. So my next step is I wrote a manifesto, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to refine that because I think actually I've learned a lot that will make that a little sharp, well, a lot sharper, because I think, and then I think that will resonate rather than it being, I'm trying to force something that I think is a good idea and you're going to think it's a good idea too. I'm going to talk about people's problems and ways of going through and sorting out those problems.
It's good. And what I would say is, as well, I mean, you said like it's about the outcomes, not the process. I think you should as well map out the process in terms of these different stages that your clients are going through. as well, to help them understand what your service is about. That would be in the on the website. That would be on the section on not why you do it, not how you do it, but what do you do, right?
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that process overview did give me more clarity.
And it will give more clarity to your clients too, right? You can actually use that to describe the service and how you, that could serve in different purposes. And I'm speaking like just to remind like myself and everyone, if I find it back between all the paper that I have here right now, oops, I might have to draw it again. Let's see. Do I find it again? Here it goes. So talking about this drawing, right? The circle.
Yeah.
And I feel that this could suit you in what shape of ever, right? That was my shape, right? You can use the same or just a normal process flow, whatever it is. And of course, I sneaked in the clarity framework, as you see, like understand, create, share. Couldn't leave that chance out, of course. But you could use that in two ways, right? Like showing people how the process looks like when you work with them. But the other way could be, okay, this is how I understand your process is looking like. Where do you, customer, think your process is different? And you could have a conversation about that, and therefore co-creating the journey together and say, well, to be honest, I need to focus strongly on this one. I don't even understand what we're doing right now. So let's lay a strong focus on this one here. And for now, forget about the other stuff. That's next year, right? Because my need is really, I need to understand my business. Somebody else is saying like, look, I've done all this work and I'm already, I have my vision and all that kind of, but I don't know, like that's what you said with the gap, right? I don't know how to get that vision into a kind of a plan right now. So you could use that as well as a starting point to understand how could we co-create the process.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a really simple way of looking at it, but it certainly would give a very good quality conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's nice, Niall. It was good to talk to you about all this kind of stuff. I really enjoyed it.
It was good. I got a lot out of it.
Yeah, true. And I just let me read one of the last comments here. So, George, I don't know if I can answer that question. How can we find the person with the more than 100 visuals? I'm not sure what the question is aiming for, but Scott has a good idea for a new thinking rule, which he says, always crumble the first sheet.
Yeah, but this could now become a thing.
Yeah, that could become a thing. That would be cool. And Didier says as well, drawing on paper in front of your clients is similar to home staging, where organizing the information leave place for the client mind to see where they are, right? So that's what we spoke about with the process. And you could even start co-creating this process with them and say, look, this is my guess and where should we focus and what do you think should we do here? And then they own that process even more.
I think that, again, is a really good idea. It takes the ego out of it. It's not about me, it's about...
Now, wonderful. So 2 things housekeeping wise. First of all, when we say bye here, stay in the call so we can debrief afterwards after live session. And but if people are interested in your services, right? You're an accountant helping other people growing their business. Where could they find you?
Okay, my traditional place it's called the backpocket-cfo.com. You can see finance services there, spreadsheets galore. And then the new offer, which is the live website's not live, but you can sign up to get the manifesto. It's called the visualentrepreneur.com. Sign up there, get the manifesto. You may get the new one, give me a couple of days. Or you may get the old one, give me a couple of days, you'll get the new one. Now I've got some work to do after this.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And as you all know, you find myself on holgernielspol.com. And I will do more Clarity Live sessions. If you enjoyed this one after summer, I will have a long summer break of 5 weeks until end of August. But then I already have 6 or 7 people in the line who wanted to do a Clarity live session as well. So I will do those sessions most likely after summer, if you like that, right? So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Niall, for this session.
My pleasure. Thank you, Holger.
And I see everybody soon after summer. Wish you a great summer break, everybody, right? Bye-bye.